Hello, Justin. Hi, how are you today?
Doing well. How are you?
Good, good, great. Thank you so much for being on this podcast show today. And I really look forward to having some amazing knowledge on women's health because I strongly believe, that's one area that a lot of women still need to know and understand a lot about. And specifically from the perspective of understanding women's health from the ancient perspective. I mean, we are getting too much into the modern understanding of female health. So this is what I look forward to discussing with you. But I will introduce you first and then we'll move on to our session. So Justine Lemos is an Ayurvedic practitioner, Vedic astrologer, author, yoga teacher, dancer, and a speaker. She's also a PhD in cultural anthropology. Justine also runs a yoga studio by the name OneYOga in Fort Bragg, California. She has been featured on Gaia TV in a series called Thrive, Self-Healing with Ayurveda. Dr. Lemos has been studying Ayurveda, Ayurvedic spiritual counseling, and Vedic astrology for many years. She has also completed extensive study on the relationship between Ayurveda and yoga and is a trained teacher of Hatha Yoga. Justine specializes in boosting radiance and finding balance through the female life cycle, transforming PMS, hot flashes, infertility, skin issues, and depletion into blissful, radiant energy and delightful health. So that's like an amazing profile, Justine. And I think I'll start with my first question only. How could you manage to create such an amazing profile? I mean, how did you got into yoga and Ayurveda and various other things, PhD, how all of it happened?
Well, it started about 25 plus years ago when I was studying in my undergraduate studies, and I met my teacher, my guru of classical Indian dance, and became very, very involved with the study of Odissi dance, and really trained with my teacher in a very, very traditional way. And this opened this vast reservoir of knowledge, of mythology, of religion, of spirituality that I didn't have a sense of prior to that time. It was really holistic training. And then my teacher and I were traveling to India, and we went to Kerala. And then I undertook training in Mohiniyattam dance there in Kerala. And there, as you know, in Kerala, there's so much Ayurveda.
Yes, I think you must be knowing more than what I know. I mean, I've just visited once, but yeah, it's the hub of all that ancient knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it wasn't until I came back to the US, I was writing my doctoral dissertation, and then I became pregnant with my child. And it was after I had the birth of my child that I really felt like, wow, I need a system for understanding the body and for understanding health that's different than just like the latest fad. What's the latest herb that's on the grocery store? What's the latest superfood is like a big thing in the West of like eating superfoods and taking this supplement. But that is just a random system. It's not a holistic scientific system of holistic wellness and health that's been tested for thousands of years. And so then in my mind, I was like, oh, I know what it is. It's Ayurveda. I know what this is. And so then at that time, I really undertook training as a practitioner, as an Ayurvedic practitioner in the US. But just with a sense that I was going to really heal myself and have a system for my family. And actually my teacher in the US, he's a Western MD, as well as an Ayurvedic doctor, as well as a Chinese medical practitioner.
Wow.
So he has this vast reservoir of knowledge and this wonderful synthesis of Western science, medical background and clinical training, and then this deep reservoir of knowledge in Ayurveda. So I did my training with him, and then slowly, I started to see, build my practice because I had this knowledge. And then in that way, it just really built organically. Yeah.
Nice. So, what has been your experience being to India and coming and learning the ancient way of living from the land of Ayurveda itself? Like, I mean, you initially started learning in the US, but when you actually came to Kerala and you were in an environment where Ayurveda and yoga actually happened. So what was your experience being in India, learning all of that?
Well, I've had really great experiences learning at the feet of masters in really traditional kinds of ways. And most of my teachers in India have not been like big swamis and gurus that you meet at a big ashram and they've got a big building out. No, they're just like humble people living, in a small place in the rice paddies, and I would go to them and study with them and study ancient texts with them in a very kind of quiet way. And so it has really been a personal journey of learning that then now I am, for the past many years, I've been sharing out with a variety of clients, friends, people, students here in the West, and then also in India. And really now, because of the Gaia shows and because of the internet, I have students and clients all around the world, in Australia, New Zealand, UK, all over Europe and in India as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. I believe because, Ayurveda is looking a different surge now. I mean, there was a time during independence when Ayurveda actually got into a low, and then, the modern way of looking at medicine went up. And now I guess it's happening the other way around. People are actually realizing it's the whole way of life that makes a difference. So I think I'll redirect to our topic now, which is about women's health. And, starting with the very basics, what according to Ayurveda is a healthy female cycle, and how is it related to different tissues of the body? So we'll start with the body, and then we'll move on to the moon cycle, which is an ancient understanding of this concept.
Beautiful. Thank you. So it's very interesting that actually Ayurvedically, when the menstrual cycle is very very healthy, it doesn't really create any problems. There might be a day or two of lower energy or time of rest quite naturally, but there's no headache, there's no cramping, there's no bloating, there's no emotional extremes, all of these things that we've come to associate it with the menstrual cycle and menstruation. They just simply aren't there. Similarly, throughout the world, in many traditional societies, women do not experience any symptoms as they move through, or any kind of difficult symptoms, pain and suffering, etc., as they move through their life cycle and move through menopause. And so actually all of this symptomology and all of these experiences that are of discomfort are actually signs that the body is out of balance, and that the tissues, the dhatus, the doshas are out of balance. Yeah,
exactly. So, my next question is related to what you just mentioned. What does an unhealthy menstrual cycle with PMS, irregular, flow, pain, mood swings, and what all symptoms that a woman faces speak about women's health? Like, where are we going wrong, and what kind of vital information is our body trying to communicate?
This is such an important question, because always our bodies are giving us signs and symbols. That's my academic training, is in the study of signs and symbols and semiotics. And so this is something very exciting. Like,
that's very interesting.
Yes. Yeah. And so similarly, our body is always giving us signs and symbols about what is happening on a deeper level. And if we can learn to read those signs, we can stop imbalances before they even happen. And this is something that I'm very passionate about, and very passionate about reading the pulse, looking at the face, so that we can, it's like all of this knowledge is available to us. We just need to read it.
Exactly. Okay? I guess there's traditional Chinese medicine really captures this concept amazingly, looking at your face and just figuring out what organ systems are not functioning fine. And
Ayurveda has the similar system, actually, in the face, the tongue, the pulse. So unhealthy menstrual cycle, which can manifest in so many different ways: PMS, irregular flow, heavy flow, pain, mood swings, crampings, bloating is one that I will frequently experience, extreme anxiety, sorrow, depression, all of these things. Really, they are all signs that the doshas, the vital humors of the body, are lacking in balance, lacking in rhythm. Now, of course, many of your listeners will have some knowledge of the doshas and their relationship to the five the Panchamahabhutas, the five great elements. I'll just review very briefly. So Vata is similar to air and ether. In the body, it's responsible for communication, transportation, and movement. If Vata dosha is out of balance, someone will experience in their menstrual cycle, they can experience a lot of pain, They can experience a lot of blood clotting, like deep colored blood. A headache will come from vata dosha being out of balance, and also anxiety, a lot of anxiety and emotional, that feeling of tension. With pitta dosha imbalance, and these are generalities for each person, will be specific. With pitta imbalance, then we'll experience hot flashes, we'll experience very heavy menstrual flow, very heavy bleeding. Kapha imbalance will experience bloating, will experience mood swings, and some friends may experience all three of these things, and that's because all the doshas are out of balance. Now, each of the phases, we'll talk about the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle, but also we can relate the phases of the menstrual cycle to the doshas. And there's a few different ways in the literature that this is spelled out. And I happen to think that a lot of those books have been written by men who don't have a direct experience of the menstrual cycle. But let's just say, I find the best system that makes the most sense to me, and I'll have to go back and look at the classical text, because I haven't looked in the classical texts on this, only secondary literature, but menstruation itself, because it's bleeding and blood always relates to pitta dosha. Menstrual, when you're bleeding, is pitta dosha. Some books say that's vata dosha time. I don't think it's right. Pitta dosha, the heat will come out, maybe anger comes out, spots on the skin may come out because that heat is coming out, right? After the menstruation is finished, then kapha dosha is the building time. Estrogen is building. Things feel much better. Generally, estrogen makes everything lovely. Then after ovulation, we build towards ovulation. After ovulation, before menstruation, comes the vata dosha time. And this is when there can be a lot of stress and pressure and a lot of anxiety before the menstrual cycle starts. So that's how the doshas flow. And we can notice if where we are feeling imbalance, if you're getting a lot of bloating and weight gain during ovulation, you're probably having a kapha dosha imbalance, because in Ayurveda, like increases like. We'll always know what the imbalance is by what is out of balance.
Okay, that's so interesting. I mean, I'm just wondering, like, with a lot of women, including me, there have been times in the past when you immediately cannot figure out what is it that goes wrong, that you start to have a lot of bloating just before your periods, or what is it that causes that acne or a rash or a wrinkle just before your cycle. So there is so much deep-rooted science around how these doshas are working. So help me also understand, for somebody who has any kind of such conditions happening to them during the cycle, from this perspective of what you just told about the doshas, how should a woman should look at what's going on? I mean, people, for a lot of women, it's simply a PMS or a headache or a body pain or leg pain or bloating or whatever, and the simple solution that they seek is maybe a small tablet that can just help them get rid of a headache or a leg pain or a body pain. So what ideally should be the approach for when you know that the root lies somewhere else?
Well, this is a huge question, as we're living in a world that doesn't support us through our. So how much of the imbalance is actually because you ate the wrong food 20 days ago? That has a little effect on the body, and it does have an effect. But how much of it is because those natural cycles of the body, the natural rhythms of style, are not supported by social cultural structure, society? Days off from your duties and cleaning, etc., taking care of the children when you're menstruating, because naturally the energy is lower. Now we have to go to the job and we have to go to the work and we have to do all of these things, having these rhythms, these biorhythms, have to push against them. So there are always these overriding kind of phenomena forward. That said, we can begin to take, I think the easiest thing to do is to begin to take note of when imbalance is arising. Is it headache on the first day of the period? the last day of the period? Is it flashes right before menstruation? Is it bloating? Just start to notice, and then that gives you a clue about what's happening in the body, and then you can begin to take that. Yeah.
Okay. No, I mean, and that's definitely, I guess, one of the most important solutions. We really need to watch ourselves, what's going on, right? Yeah. Okay. So I think I'll now move on my question to the ancient understanding of looking at, this phase of life for women. How does Ayurveda look at female cycle, and is it related to the moon cycle in Ayurveda?
So as far as I know, in the traditional texts, they do not make a direct correlation between the menstrual cycle and the moon. However, all of this pull out and pull together. The deepest the cycle that I'm aware of, limited knowledge, are on the tithis from each lunar light has its own particular energy. And so there are all these lunar energies, all these lunar goddesses that move us through the phases of the moon. Yeah. And actually, even those tithis and the nittis that relate to those tithis, they all relate to the elements. Yeah. So they have their own flavor, their own character. And many of you will be know. So the menstrual cycle typically 8, even 30 more or less will naturally relate to the moon cycle. Now that means that if you're menstruating in the middle of the cycle at the half moon, that there's anything necessarily wrong. Moon relates to the waters in the body, and we are 90% water. The grows full. We know the tides, the ocean, right on the ocean, and it's new moon right now. We're coming to the new moon, and we've had this huge tide. So today we got to walk along the ocean and tide out and see all the shells. So it was very beautiful. So full, so does the grow full. Light grows ojas, and then means that ojas, that prana energy, naturally leaves the body as the moon goes dark. And so we'll find typically that the menstrual cycle, if menstruating at the full moon, that this is not a cycle of fertility. This is a cycle of creation, like we're creating something, but probably creating a track. When menstruation at the new moon and the ovulation at the full moon, this is a cycle where it's much more likely that new life will start, that child will. You know, there are 4 distinct we see in the moon, the full moon and the new moon and the half. So in that way, we can also relate that and understanding the 4 phases of you don't have direct correlation, but because I'm not sure that the ancients had understanding of these 4 of the menstrual cycle and all arbitrary kinds of overlays onto a large system. You know, definitely we can see the 3 doshas, we can see the lunar cycle, we can see all these things in the menstrual cycle.
Yeah, great. So how, like, the 4 phases that you've just mentioned, how are these 4 phases described in the modern way of understanding female cycle? I guess there are 4 phases that's how we understand, and what is so let's just first discuss what are these phases and what to do about these. Maybe that can be the next question.
So in the Western scientific view, there are 4 phases, and I don't necessarily follow this in my practice. I really look at the doshas, I look at the lunar energies, etc. But they've got the menstrual phase. That's when the bleeding is happening. Then we've got the follicular phase, and that's when the hypothalamus sends a signal to the pituitary gland, which of course yoga, kriya, mantra all affect. the hypothalamus and the pituitary and enact regular secretions from these glands. So that will affect the menstrual cycle. So that gives the signal to the pituitary to release the follicular stimulating hormone, which then stimulates the ovaries to produce about 5 to 20 small sacs called follicles. Each follicle has an immature egg. Then the healthiest egg matures, and then that lasts about 16 days. And then ovulation, as estrogen rises, ovulate. And again, the pituitary gland triggers a release, which starts ovulation. And then the phases, that's after the follicle releases its egg. And if you don't get pregnant, then that begins the menstrual cycle again. So it's always this ongoing cycle, right? Just like the moon is always waxing, always waning, always changing, and there's most ancient systems place the moon as the feminine and the sun as the masculine, right? And there's no wonder why. Like the moon is always changing, just like our bodies are always going through these different phases. And men change as well, but there's more that steady hormonal energy. Our hormones are always changing from day to day, just like the moon is always changing.
Exactly. So I guess, I could just pick up one point from what you mentioned, which is very important. How important it is to be stress-free, because if everything is being directed by the hypothalamus and pituitary, then your stress and hormones are in close coordination with each other and, working behind how your cycle happens.
And, in Ayurveda, stress is Vata dosha, the nervous system. So, and Vata is the queen or king of the doshas. If Vata gets out of whack, everything else gets out of whack. So it starts first with calming the mind, regulating the endocrine system, the glandular system, the chakra system, and then health emerges from there. Yeah.
Wow. And that, I guess that also brings us to a point why yoga is as a form of, even if you look at it as a form of exercise, why is it so important to practice yoga as compared to the other active forms of exercises, which are very young.
Absolutely. And there now yoga has become like another form, but it's not. It has special properties in it, twists, back bends, all these things that you don't get if you're running on a treadmill. You don't get it. You don't get dynamic twists. You don't get back bends, and you don't get pranayama. And you don't get, and much of Western yoga has left out drishti, has left out eye movements, and it's part of traditional yoga. And of course, because of my training in dance, in classical dance, all the eye movements, right? But what the important part about it is that the drishti works on the optical nerve. When we move the optical nerve, we literally squeeze the pituitary gland and we begin to regulate the pituitary secretions. Now think about that. If the pituitary gland is responsible for releasing the egg and responsible for regulating the hormone cycles or regulating the menstrual cycle, what are we doing? With some simple drishti, we can affect our whole.
That's amazing. Nice. I guess being a dancer, this aspect, I think you can really bring out it well. Because my daughter actually, she learns Kathak, and there's a lot of eye movements that the teacher teaches, and sometimes she's like, what am I supposed to do? I don't understand these eye movements. I guess it takes some time for you to actually understand because I guess it's on the outside it shows as if it's eye movement, but at the back it's all those optic nerves working when it comes to moving the eyes and creating a lot of changes within.
And the eyes, like, not to digress, but so much of our brain power, so Vata dosha, the nervous system, goes into the eyes. Like actually some huge amount, I forget the number, like 70% of our calories goes to our eyes because sight is so essential, right, to being alive. So you think about that, and then you're deliberately moving the eye patterns and changing the focus. You're changing your whole brain.
Right.
You're changing your brain state. Like magically and instantly. We don't get taught this in dance, but suddenly you feel it. You do your drishti, and then you're like,
no, that definitely makes sense. And I guess it's more of a perception opening up, a new perception opening up, how eyes take in everything and the mind processes what eyes take in. So great. So okay, Justine, now help us understand, like, from the hormones perspective, now getting a little more deeper into the scientific understanding of women's cycle. From the hormones perspective, specifically estrogen, there's a lot of conversation around estrogen and estrogen dominance and progesterone going low, and specifically after, in those late 30s where the estrogen starts to fall down, there some imbalance start to happen, and that's where you actually start to see where your actual health lies, where your skin starts to get bad, your hair starts to fall out, your weight starts to go out of place, and then you realize what is it that's happening. Because in my practice also, I come across a lot of women saying that up till say 5 years back, or even 2 years or 3 years back, all was okay. I was living the same lifestyle, I was eating the same foods, but it was working then. Why is it not working now? So what is this whole science about hormones?
So I think you really said the answer in the question, which is, you said something like, like the true health is revealed. And I'll explain why that is so, which is that estrogen, which is very kapha, it's very unctuous. It makes everything really lovely and nice and makes us look beautiful and feel good and all of this. So we have estrogen like up here, and then we have all these health imbalances like Pitadosha and all of this. Then our estrogen quite naturally begins to reduce as we age. That will happen. It's just going to happen as we age. So what happens? All of these health imbalances, now like an iceberg sticking up out of the water, they were always there, just the water has gone down and now we're experiencing it. So it's not like you get hot flashes when you're 45 or something. No, you always had those hot flashes. You always had Ranjika Pitta imbalance, liver heat imbalance, anger imbalance, but now you're experiencing it. Before, you weren't experiencing it because the estrogen made everything so lovely. Now the estrogen is going and, oh God, I have hot flashes. No, you've always had that liver imbalance because probably you were drinking too much wine for 10 years. And so it made an imbalance in the liver. And so now you're experiencing that extreme hot flashes. And unfortunately, just stopping eating garlic now is not enough. You needed to stop it 10 years ago, but we can still take measures to remedy those imbalances. But the reason why we suddenly experience them is we have that dip in estrogen that will happen.
Okay. And so looking at this aspect anciently, what does Ayurveda talk about it? Like, a combination of rather Ayurveda and yoga, because as you mentioned, like the role of hypothalamus and pituitary gland, and which very strongly gets regulated when you get into the yogic practices. So when Ayurveda and yoga comes together and such estrogen related conditions are happening to somebody, what is the approach that Ayurveda or a yogic science would take to bring about that balance, specifically in the later years? Because earlier years, I don't think you need much. Estrogen, as you said, is already covering all of it.
Well, you still should be practicing because that will keep the body in balance even while the estrogen. So if we can start practice earlier, it will be the best, and that's like when we see these long-term yoga practitioners. Like I have friends who are in their 50s and they look like they're like, they're not doing any Botox or anything, but they're so vibrant and so beautiful because they have this vitality, right?
Okay.
So once that balance begins to wane and we see, or the estrogen begins to dip, and then we see these imbalances, we really need to look specifically at what's happening. Is the main imbalance, like skin, hot flashes? Is it weight gain? Is it dryness? What is happening? Is it headaches? And then take that are appropriate to balance both via yoga and via Ayurveda, like that.
Okay. So, from the like hormonal activity, relating it to the moon cycle, how does it work? Like when we talk of the moon cycle, 4 phases of women getting into before getting into that menstrual cycle, how are the hormones behaving during that cycle? So what is that connection between the moon cycle and the hormones?
Well, it depends. Each one. And I don't like to project like another thing onto women that's like, oh, you're supposed to menstruate at the new moon and then ovulate at the full moon. And if you don't, you're broken or something like that.
That's
like,
not possible only, I guess.
Sad, right? It's a very sad message. But let's just say in a moon cycle and in a menstrual cycle, if If the menstruation is happening at the new moon, then after that, with the moon waxing and filling up, then there'll be more estrogen up until the ovulation at the full moon. And then quite naturally, the estrogen will flow out and more progesterone will come in as the moon is waning. So like in that case, we'll just be really in this cycle with the moon in that way. Yeah.
Okay. And for the women who are not into that in rhythm with the moon cycle, is it the same thing that happens with them also?
Well, it's the same hormonal cycle. It just won't go in sync with the moon in the same way, right?
Yeah. Okay. So like this is we are talking of the moon cycle from 20 around say 28 or 29-day cycle. What about the women who have a cycle of say 30 to 45 days, for example? Like, not everybody has a 30-day or a 28-day cycle. So 45-day cycle, I guess, is also a very normal pattern with a lot of women. So how healthy or unhealthy it is? How does Ayurveda look at it, and how is it related to the moon cycle?
So again, if the body is feeling good through the cycle, if the mind is feeling good through the cycle, if there isn't these things, hot flashes, heavy bleeding, etc., however your body is moving through, however many days your body takes to move through that cycle is normal and beautiful unto yourself. I don't usually worry about a long cycle. That just means the body is taking longer to ovulate. I do kind of get concerned about the cycle getting very short. That shows that usually there's a Vata dosha aggravation and depletion in the tissues. I'll find this, and or if the cycle gets very, very long, 45 days plus, that can show body is getting out of balance. There's depletion. We'll find this in cases of anorexia, in terms of extreme Vata dosha, aggravation, depletion, etc., things like that. Yeah.
Okay, so that brings me to another important question, Justine. A lot of women, specifically in their late 30s, as they start to hit their perimenopause or in their premenopausal days, like somewhere which starts around, let's say, late 30s and lasts up till your early 50s. So those crucial years of life, 15 to 20 years, a lot of women, that is also the time, have already piled up a lot of weight. Okay. And when we are talking of the imbalance of Vata dosha, which means a lot of dryness, a lot of, coolness in the body, which needs to be balanced with a lot of heating stuff or oily stuff. And that is exactly the time when a lot of women would want to give up all kinds of fats because they're getting obese. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, please carry on.
So we need to look at this in two ways, actually. First way is that Vata dosha's primary site that it rules over is two places, colon and the mind, the nervous system. So our tendency is to always try and treat things with food. Actually, we can treat Vata dosha. We can treat Vata dosha with abhyanga, with shirodhara. We can treat it with hot packs on the body. We can treat it in so many ways that is not ingesting heavy foods like that, right? So we have to remember, because the nervous system, we can eat a bowl of ice cream, then our nervous system feels like, oh, I want to take a nap. But actually the prime way to balance the nervous system is meditation. There's no calories in meditation. We will gain no weight in meditation, right? Okay. Second thing.
But I guess a lot of women don't relate to this concept of meditation directly. I mean, it's because it's not a quick fix approach. It doesn't happen in a day that you start meditation and few days later you'll start to see the results. But gradually it's impacting those hormones, changing things physically, chemically, physiologically, and then so it's a long-term route, right?
Absolutely, and all of Ayurveda is. I mean, if we want a quick fix where we just take a pill, then just take the pill, right? But we can feel better right away. We can feel better right away, but those long-term things, you took 20 years to get this imbalance. It's not going to go away in 3 days, right?
That's right.
So the second thing is about weight gain. Now we have to distinguish, because if there's existing weight and the body is quite heavy, then that's one thing. But actually at menopause, the body should gain a bit of weight. And that is very good, because as we age, bones get more fragile. Right? We know this. Old people, they fall down, they break their hip, it's horrible. But the body needs to hold on a bit of weight to pad the bones and to have enough vitality to make it through the old age, which is very Vata dosha. Old people get quite dry and get dried out. And so they need that reserve of fat. And so while it's not fashionable and people don't like me when my clients come in, now there's obesity and there's long-term weight, and I think healthy at any size. Absolutely. There's Kapha dosha people who should be heavier than Vata dosha people, right? It's very beautiful. If there's weight on the body that is not there naturally, and then there's more weight gain, that's a separate issue. But a bit of weight gain at menopause, it's to be expected, and it's actually Ayurvedically, it's desirable.
So for the women, like, what would be your message for the women who consciously go ahead and try to lose a lot of weight, specifically during these years of the time when they should actually be supporting that weight which is coming on? So, because I guess there's a completely different understanding of what we are discussing right now. That is a time when it becomes really difficult for the body to lose weight. And that's a time women, specifically with a lot of awareness these days, women would be like, in my practice also I see, or even in my friends I see, they would directly be, just hitting the gym, doing these 2 hours, 3 hours of aggressive gymming practices just to maintain that weight. I guess that's completely anti of what we are talking here, right?
In many, like, we want to be healthy, we want healthy exercise, we don't want over exercise, we don't want obsession with health and obsession with exercise. That also isn't healthy. We want to create this space where the body can really rest in itself, and a lot of weight gain is from stress. A lot of weight gain is from stress, and if the body comes into its natural state, it's going to naturally be very, very beautiful and very graceful. And that doesn't always mean rail thin.
No, that definitely makes sense. So, now coming on to the solution for the problem that we've just discussed, on a generic basis, what kind of a diet or, herb pattern or even supplementation if required can really help a woman who's facing these stages of vata? Or because I guess even if we are not in our 30s or 40s, even if we are in our 20s, still vata is something that's really high with a lot of youngsters also these days, because of so much of exposure, going out and living that activity lifestyle. So as per you, considering the modern understanding of foods, which is all limited to calorie counting or a protein counting stuff, how exactly should be a diet for a woman to make sure that she enters into those cycles really smoothly and can really control all these conditions like PMS or all these, nagging
so issues? The first most important thing is not diet. It's regular sleep, good sleep hygiene, meditation practice, and abhyanga, self-massage, doing regular self-massage. None of those things have to do with food.
So when we talk
then
of
if
abhyanga,
we go to food,
I'm sorry, I'm just cutting you there. So when we talk of abhyanga, so how much time do you think a woman should be spending on abhyanga? Because it could be as quick as, say, 5 minutes of just applying oil on the body and just washing it off, or you spend some time massaging, or like
either way you'll get benefit. Of course, if we have all this time to massage the body and do some yoga and blah, 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 that's great. If not, just oiling the body, getting the oil into the body, getting that nurturance into the body, then taking shower, wonderful. If you can do that, you will have so much benefit. So then when it comes to diet and food, actually how we eat is as important, if not more important, than what we eat. Are we eating with a quiet mind? Are we enjoying our food? Or are we distracted by phone, distracted by TV? If we are, then the body won't really be able to take that nutrients in a positive way. Of course, eating largely vegetarian, unfried food, well-balanced food, well-spiced food. I mean, most traditional, not the heavy post-colonial, but the traditional cuisines, village cuisines, so-called, in India will be very, very balanced diet and very good diet for you, right?
So I guess that brings me to another question. Like I guess it's inherently has always been there in Indian cultures, and even if we belong to different parts of India, still that with ancient wisdom, depending which area you are living in, that ancient wisdom was always there in those, ancient cultures. Like I remember my grandparents focusing on specific kind of a diet in winters and having all those seeds in winters, cooked a certain way.
Or just like, in Delhi, like when I was living, like in winter, they have ginger in the chai, and in summer, they have cardamom in the chai. It's like perfect, it's like what we should have. And those are the spices. And so all of that wisdom is there, and returning back to that wisdom, that more simple wisdom. And also it's because nature is always giving us what we need. And so naturally the flora, the fauna in a particular place will give us what we need. Like here in the springtime, everything goes yellow. Like all the plants that grow up, they're yellow everywhere. And it's nature telling us that we need more yellow in the diet. So at that time in the spring, I'll start to take dandelion root because it's very bitter and cleanses the body naturally. And then turmeric because it's yellow. And so the body needs more of those things. So if we just look out and notice, nature will give us what we need. Even if we're living in a city, we can notice cycles and changes through the seasons naturally.
No, that definitely makes sense. And so, coming back to our question, like from the herb perspective, so food is one thing that we have every single day. I mean, that's something that that's with everybody. But the power of herbs is something I believe is it's still in a very novice stage, though Ayurveda has documented all of it. And even traditional Chinese medicine has a very specific focus on herb, which can be really health building, even if you take those small quantities. So what's your take on herbs, specifically some common herbs which are being promoted really aggressively these days, like shatavari, like ashwagandha, and people just going on to consuming these abruptly. So
it drives me crazy. It drives
not?
me crazy on so many levels, especially because we're depleting herb supplies that we need to actually build up. And like I see it here in the West, where there's shelves and shelves and everyone's taking ashwagandha. Actually, ashwagandha is very heating. And so I have these like women with hot flashes, and they're like, well, I take ashwagandha. And I'm like, stop taking ashwagandha. And they're like, but it's the healthy thing I do. And I'm like, well, just stop it. Right. And so we have to be very careful. We really need to know what we're doing when we're taking herbs. And so like, I don't just give herbal recommendations to everyone because I don't know what's happening inside your physiology. Right. The second thing is, Ayurvedic herbs really work synergistically. They work the best with each other. So like just taking a turmeric tablet doesn't do the same thing as like turmeric in a masala mix when it's with coriander and it's with cumin and it's with ilachi and it's with all these things that they're working, their intelligences are working together, and then we take them in, right? So be very aware of just taking those single supplements, of just taking shatavari.
No, thank you so much for bringing in that point, because I mean, I see there's a lot of surge happening in functional medicine these days, where the supplementation part of it is really, it's something which is very strong point in that kind of a modality. And it's an amazing science, no doubt about that. But the only thing that I could see there is, aggressive use of supplements. I mean, you just figure out one imbalance in the body and then you have a quick fix of one supplement getting into your body. So now it's not medicine, now it's supplement. And I see people blindly getting onto, not minding getting onto, say 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 supplements through the day, just to create that quick fix. So how healthy or unhealthy that is?
I think it's quite unhealthy. I think we just pee it all out. Actually, a lot of Chinese doctors say that Westerners, and by Westerners, I just mean, people who are taking this practice of like popping all this, have the most expensive urine in the world because they're spending so much money to take it in, and then they just pee it out. That said, anyone will benefit from a simple cumin, coriander, fennel seed tea. Like the very basic Ayurvedic CCF tea is very gently cleansing, stimulates digestion. If you sip on that tea all day long, instead of taking your chai, instead of taking so much caffeine, you'll see massive benefit. So we can get so much benefit from just spices.
Nice. So for somebody who has these, hormonal imbalances, again, coming back to the women and the ones who really have these conditions like PCOD, PCOS, or are into their troublesome perimenopause or menopause, by following these simple practices, getting on to say, not getting fancier in their cooking styles, but sticking to these ancient, what traditions have told us, do you think their conditions can improve? Because I see a lot of women, the entire focus is on looking that perfect treatment that can heal that PCOD or PCOS, which doesn't happen ever. So what ideally, as per you, should be the approach for such kind of a woman?
So it depends. And there's a lot of people out there who are just selling miracles. And I think it's very unethical. It's like if the body is so far out of balance, like with ovarian cysts, or endometriosis, there comes a point where, we can make someone more comfortable. But even the ancient Ayurvedic texts say this needs surgery. We're not going to be able to just take an herb and have it go away, right? There's like this long-standing imbalance that the body has learned to do this. So of course we can see things change, especially perimenopause, menopause, hot flashes we have wonderful success with, but it's different than just taking a pill. It's a process, it's a journey. We go, things change in the body. PMS, absolutely. And then things like PCOD, those things are deeper, longer standing imbalances. And so we can have some success, but we can't just say, oh, I'm going to follow this diet for 6 months and everything's going to be better. Yeah.
So if yoga becomes a part of the way we are talking about, if you start living that ways and also incorporate yoga for healing such conditions, do you think it's the solution for the problem without having medication to your rescue? I mean, on a general basis, I'm asking this. Of course, there could be conditions where you need some medicine support, you need some other support, but for young women who out of the blue are having this problem, like for no specific reason, when they start to align themselves with the right cooking styles, with the right eating patterns and yoga, which can really support their reproductive health, can this condition be stopped and reversed at that point in time?
Absolutely. As long as the lifestyle is supporting of that, as long as they aren't pushing against the natural rhythms. Yeah.
Okay. And so we just spoke of the moon cycles when it comes to women's health. On a generic basis, if I have to ask you a pattern of living through a month's time, starting from the first phase of menstruation to the last stage, ideally, again on a generic basis, how should a woman be living through a month's cycle from the physical, mental, emotional, dietary, or any other perspective that you can think of, like because the second phase, I guess, is more of the resting time that a woman should be spending more on. Initial time they can be little. So what would be that right pattern?
So after menstruation, then the energy is building. So that's a good time to take on more projects, to be able to do more and to, expand. And then after ovulation, there's that contraction of energy. And so this is a time to rest more, to go more in, to introspect, to journal, to rest more, and to not try and push the energy out into the world as much, being very aware in the 4 or 5 days before our menstruation that Vata dosha is quite deranged. We need to do some extra meditation. We need to do some extra rest. We need to do some extra pranayam, do the oil massage. And then if Vata dosha is soothed and tamed, moving through menstruation will be it will be really easy. We can tell when the body is in balance. And I myself have months like this and then months not like this. And I go, okay, wow, I really need to look at myself. Where like suddenly one day I just start menstruating and I'm like, oh, I didn't have any cramps. I didn't feel tired. I wasn't crying. Nothing happened, like, wow, okay, I'm really feeling this good balance. And then other months it's not that way, and then I look and I say, oh, okay, I did this and I did this and I did this. But we're human beings with free will and egos, and we'll never be perfect, and we're always making our own choices, right? And so we'll never get it exactly right, but we can learn through the process.
Yeah, so I think there was a very deep self-realization a few days back. I would really want to quote this experience. So I was I'm very much deeply into yoga, And as a part of my practice, I did not, I mean, this was a recent thing, I really want to bring it out. I was practicing, so it was my first day of the cycle. And as you said, like Vata dosha is working towards the downward movement of the energy at that point in time.
Yes.
And I on that first day, early morning, I did a headstand, and I did some, headstand along with some, being there and trying to go into different postures, being into that headstand. And the practice was all okay. I mean, I very smoothly did it, and I thought, okay, everything is okay. About 10 hours later, okay, by the evening time, I started to have some shoulder and neck pain. I mean, it was a very pinching kind of a pain, but it was traversing all through my right arm. And within few minutes, I realized that it's something not normal, because within a few minutes, I couldn't, there was no position that I could keep my arm in any position that could give me relief. And it was a very, one pointed nerve kind of a pain. And for next 15-20 days, I realized that I could not sleep at night at all, because as soon as I used to go off to sleep, that pain used to just, so initially I thought maybe something has gone wrong with my practice in yoga, but if it would have been then and there, I would have realized the impact. And the practice was all normal. I was all okay. Why did it happen 10 hours after the practice? And then when I, and that's the time also I started to learn more about Vata and, so again, that's a question to you. Do you think I'm anticipating it right, that it was the Vata energy which was supposed to be downward? And then when I went into an inversion, the Vata energy, the pressure of Vata energy went more towards the shoulder, and because the pressure was too high, it did hit somewhere, and it was because it's related to the nervous system, it did hit at some nerve. Do you think
it's absolutely possible? It's absolutely possible. I mean, we don't know for sure, but it's a good explanation.
Yeah, because I mean, immediately after practice, nothing happened. I mean, I did not feel any pain. It was very smooth practice that I did and everything. So that's where I realized that that ancient wisdom does make a lot of sense. If they say that you should be resting during those, before that time, for 5 days, not doing much, and there is some science behind it, because you don't know.
And also not taking inversions during the menstrual cycle, because it reverses the flow. And now we're getting, in the past 20 years, we've had leaders who are women in yoga, and we're getting so much wisdom from them and from their practice. They're like, hey, I did this for 40 years under a male guru. They didn't tell me any of this stuff because they didn't know this. And so now we're getting these new teachings. Yeah.
Great. So Justine, now we've talked of the moon cycle. I would really want to have some little conversation on the seasonal cycle, Ritucharya, okay? And how does it impact a female's menstrual cycle? And again, from the diet perspective, because I guess that's the first area that women actually relate to for any kind of health condition. So from the diet perspective, what would be some, generic guidelines for every woman to follow so that the cycle is smooth, and in the later years also, the perimenopausal years or the menopausal years are smooth. So what would be your take on the seasonal cycles?
Well, so we generally divide the year into 3 sections, 3 main doshas: the summertime, which is pitta and hot; the fall into winter, which is more vata dosha and more dry; and then spring, which is kapha dosha. It's winter into spring, which is wetter and heavier. And so as we flow through the seasons, we quite naturally gravitate towards things that will serve us through the seasons. I mean, we do this naturally. When it's cold outside, we put on a sweater. This is the same thing as Ayurvedic wisdom. When it gets cold outside, we want to take more soups, more dals, more warm things. When it's very hot, we don't crave those things. And so just eating in a seasonal rhythm. The main thing, if you can do, is you can eat what is fresh and available to you from the earth, from the land. And, it's really nice, in India, you have marketplaces everywhere where there's fresh seasonal vegetables. You aren't getting, you can in the supermarkets now get things from everywhere, but if you can eat what's fresh and seasonal, that will move you through the cycle of the year. Yeah. And in the way, because actually we have to look at the relative impact of different food categories on the body. Yeah. Fruits and vegetables have a very low impact on the body, but meats, dairies, oils, even grains to some degree have a much higher level of impact. Spices, high level of impact on the body. If you're having hot flashes, don't take garlic. Garlic is extremely heating. Don't take asafoetida. Don't take hing. It's incredibly heating. Yeah. Always go back to the simple knowledge of like increases like. Yeah. And then moving through the seasons is quite easy. Just eat what is seasonal and what is fresh.
Okay, so what would be your take on the new craze which is happening all across the world, which is about raw foods and living foods, as compared to how Ayurveda recommends that, it could be the same ingredients, but how you consume it makes all that difference. So what's your take on, like, and specifically if you're discussing Vata here, which might get aggravated by consuming a lot of raw food, or so do you think it's recommended, or again it depends person to person, or at what stage you are in? So how does that come in close coordination?
Most people need less raw food. Now, we can take more raw food if the digestion is very, very strong and able to extract those. Like in the West, there was a long conversation for a long time about rice, white rice versus brown rice, rice with the hole in it. And so everyone wanted to take the brown rice, but actually the fiber we can't digest. So it's much better to take the white rice because it's more digestible. In the same way as the conversation of raw versus cooked food. Ayurveda certainly prefers cooked food. Now, if you ever meet someone who has been on a raw food diet for 5 years, look at their tissues. It's like when you see a marathon runner and they're very thin, but they're very dried out.
Yes.
Yeah. And they're thin, not just thin. Look at their skin. Their skin lacks a juiciness, the
tightness is there,
and not just because they're old. It's like that vitality isn't there because the tissues have become very dried out by taking raw food all the time. Now, some raw food is fine, some small salad and good, etc. But all raw food is very difficult on the body.
Okay, so some part of cooking is an absolute must, is what we're trying to understand. But not the aggressive forms of cookings. Like, again, coming back to India, the cooking style, we have all kinds of cooking styles, prevalent in India. It's barbecue. It's really the way. So, it's more about sticking to the middle path of cooking, like boiling or steaming or all that. So does that change the energy of foods, like for a Vata dominant person? Does that change the energy of foods, like when you get onto these lighter ways of cooking, like saute or stir fry or steaming, boiling, all of that?
Not as much. We want the foods to be lightly cooked, not so boiled that all the nutrients have gone out of them. Certainly barbecuing and all burns the food, creates a lot of charcoal, has been linked to carcinogens and cancers in the body. So we want to be very careful with that. But so we definitely prefer sauteed, lightly boiled, these types of preparations.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess I really got answer to one of my questions, which was it boils down to digestion. Like, if you have a strong digestion, then, irrespective of what weather is there outside, you'll still be able to process it. So that makes a lot of sense for sure.
But remember that taking just raw food over time will naturally weaken the digestion.
Okay. Great. So what about, like, I see a lot of, like, talking about myself also, I'm too much into smoothies. I mean, not aggressively that through the day, but mornings have to be about smoothies. But as per my understanding, what I try to do is maybe add some spices to my smoothies, like adding some cinnamon to my smoothies, or some elaichi to my smoothies. So do you think that balances what
it helps? It certainly helps a lot. It really helps a great deal.
Okay. So, I mean, even if you're sticking to the raw, still you're adding some heating element to it. So that's where it's creating some balance, even if it is.
It helps a bit. I always take people off of frozen smoothies and all those types of things.
Great. So, yeah, but I guess
I'll let you get away with it if you throw in some ilachi, okay? Because I'm also not dogmatic, It's like you're very attached to something, then we work with that. So it's not.
Okay. Yeah. Great. So, okay. So, Justine, I guess we are about to have some three last questions. But one of the important questions that I would really want to understand is, again, coming to the traditional understanding of women's cycle, how is science catching up with this science? Like, I think there's a lot of awareness happening now that there are different phases. A woman should be living a specific way, but scientifically, how is it being the idea is being propagated in the world, like,
Well, I don't know if it's being propagated in the world as much as it should be at all. And
a handful of people, yes, are talking about it, but it's still not there where how it should be. But I guess science is catching up with that idea. So, do you see some synergies there where, the moon cycle actually co-joins with this idea of science coming onto the same platform and having the same viewpoint? And
well, I think so. Unfortunately, the science will be driven by grants and where there's funding, etc. And so there's not as much interest in this, like
it's preventive.
I think science has been looking for years and years for the female equivalent of like Viagra, of like some female stimulant, and they've never been able to find it. And they spend tons of money on it because if they could create it, they'd make millions and millions of dollars.
Right. And I guess Ayurveda, like as a part of its understanding about everything, and the lifestyle and the dietary pattern and everything comes together, so you don't even need to get into all that research that science is doing right now, because your body automatically stays to a stage where that vitality is always on.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Okay, great. I think I am okay. Last 3 questions. What is the relationship between pure blood quality and healthy menstrual cycle? Now I'll just give you some context on where this question is coming from. So I studied macrobiotics, okay, and as a part of my education, there's a specific focus on the blood quality in macrobiotics, and how we scientifically understand is from the concept of alkaline blood pH. Okay. Now when I started macrobiotics, which was my beginning into the wellness domain, that's all that was and that I knew. And then later when I got into Ayurveda, which I'm studying right now, I could see some synergies there where, in macrobiotics, we're talking of blood quality and we're talking of alkaline pH. And if you look into Ayurveda, it's about, balancing your pitta, which is related to your blood. So, keeping the question simple, what is the importance of a pure blood quality from an Ayurveda perspective, which is the same concept that I studied in macrobiotics also, but I really want to have an understanding of how Ayurveda.
Thank you for clarifying, because I was like, I'm not sure. So in Ayurveda, the specific layer of the tissues, the 7 dhatus, is Rakta dhatu, Rakta Pitta, Rakta dhatu. And this is specifically the red platelets, the coloring of the red platelets. And the understanding is, and my teacher, who is an MD, would be able to explain the scientific words around. I'm not trained as a Western medical doctor. I'm trained as an anthropologist and then in Ayurveda. But there's this sense that Rakta can get too heated. And this has to do with the energy of the liver and the production of Rakta, the production of platelet, the production of blood, red blood platelets. And so that, I think we could translate that to what you're talking about in terms of the blood becoming impure or becoming acidic and not being alkaline. And so that's where we have to tame Pitadosha, where we're taking cooling things, we're taking cilantro, we're taking, apples, we're taking like these sweeter taste things that can cool down the blood.
I guess that's where the synergy does happen, because I understand what you say, like you're just trying to relate this concept to the concept of tastes, which have specific energy and work on specific parts of the body. So that definitely makes sense. Okay, so I would have to have some conversation around the sleep part that's just mentioned, which I guess you kept it as the first pointer when it comes to balancing a women's women health or reproductive cycle. So what impact does dark bright lights during the night time have on the how the brain functions, and ultimately may have some impact on how a women's cycle goes through the month? So, and also for the women who have this habit of not sleeping at night, even if they're not working, they have this habit of just pushing the sleeping time to for no reason. So, what would be your message for such women?
Right. So we talked about the eyes. The eyes are an important site of Pitadosha, Alochika Pitta, fire. And so by looking into screens, looking at bright lights at the nighttime, pushing through, working through the night, you're imbalancing Pitadosha, you're imbalancing the eyes, you're imbalancing the liver, and you're not able to come into sync with those natural light qualities of the moon. How does the body know when the moon is full if all the lights are on? Yeah, it can't get the natural cooling, gentle lunar light. Yeah, that will affect the pituitary and will affect the entire body. Yeah,
I guess that
so
makes sense.
candlelight is really good at nighttime. Yeah.
I mean, there's one ritual that I just remembered when you just mentioned that. I mean, in India, we had, I mean, I don't know if it's there in your country as well, but in India, we had this practice during my grandparents' times, I remember. There was this regular practice of after dinner having a light walk under the moon. I mean, that was their regular ritual every single day. I guess it's, I mean, for us, it's something on the physical or material level, you found it soothing, but I guess it had a deeper impact now listening to what you say, like, you know, it regulates the sleep cycle. It makes you have a better sleep. And
absolutely. And we have to remember on a metaphysical level, the moon is the mind, the reflective mind. You know, the sun is the Atman, the moon is the Paratman. So it's this beautiful calming influence on the mind and on the pituitary and on the whole hormone system. And so it is not a practice widely taken here, but it is a practice that we often give in Ayurveda, that you're going for a walk outside in the moon to cool down that energy of heat.
Right. No, that's really beautiful. Yeah.
And then melatonin is something that the body naturally produces that, again, has to do with the pituitary, and the body stops producing as much melatonin for a variety of reasons, mostly stress, anxiety. And so then people will take melatonin, and it's not habit forming. I would much rather see Ayurvedic herbs used to rectify sleep, and better sleep hygiene is the real key, not just taking another pill.
Right. So that also brings me to another realization that happened, like, again, coming on to the functional medicine, there's something called 5-HTP supplement, I guess, which is being used a lot as a precursor to creating all these hormones that regulate your, not just sleep cycle, but soothing you down. So do you think that's something that should be done? I mean, because it's being very widely recommended by, you know, a lot of functional medicine practitioners.
It's not that I recommend.
Okay. So, okay, coming on to my last question, Justine, I want to have some conversation now around yoga, because we've talked about everything, moon cycle, you know, female cycle, Ayurveda and everything. What kind of yogic practices do have an impact on regulating a women's cycle? I mean, and through those four phases of cycle through the month, like what kind of a yoga practice can be practiced initially during first phase or the middle phase or the last phase? Like, again, where is this question coming from is from my own personal realization, as I just mentioned, like, you know, I wasn't aware and I got into that headstand during the last phase and I could see the impact. And now I strongly believe it was that, you know, Vata energy, which did hit me rather than the wrong posture. So there has to be a specific pattern of how specifically a female should be practicing yoga through a month's time. And there are certain phases when the practice can be really aggressive or active, and the times when it should slow down. So
Ashtanga be closed on the new moon and the full moon day. Yes.
Ashtanga should be closed on the full moon day is what you're saying.
And the new moon.
Okay.
The traditional, there would be no practice on those. New moon, on Amvasya and Purnima. No practice, nothing. So it's very interesting. It's very interesting that we have those complete every day the practice, not those things. Yeah? You know, during the coffee, have more energy, doing more practice. Yeah. And in that Hatha phase, we're very careful to ground and slide energy, more strengthening postures, more standing posture, rooting into the earth. Then we have to be careful at the phase when menstrual. If we should do movement, that usually some movement will feel good. If we're just closing in, more cramping can be there, but it's some gentle, slight movement, hip movement, something. And then menstruation, being very careful about inversions and
Mhm.
not taking inversions during that time. Yeah.
No,
Then, of course, we can also, as women, be doing Chandra Namaskar, salutation. We can
Mhm.
be doing Chandra Bhadana Pranam, which is inhaling through just left nostril, exhaling through both nostrils. A special lunar breath would be very
Mhm.
good. Regular hormonal and menstrual. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you've just in one line you've given us the entire pattern about how it should be, and that definitely makes sense. Thank you so much, Justine, for your amazing knowledge and information, and it's been really great connecting with you. I mean, anything else that you would want to add on to, or you think that I should have asked, and is important for women to know for their cycle?
No, I don't think so. It's really enjoyable and really how much time they were really inspiring to answer.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Justin, and wish you all the best for whatever you're doing. I think you're doing great and amazing. And I look forward to having our Instagram live also soon. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Namaste. Yeah.
Right. Much love
Bye.
to you. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.